Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from July 18th to the 24th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I try to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. But we got a lot of news this week, so we're just going to jump right into it. As this came Thursday after I published my Wednesday update, breaking from Tom Angle as of July 21st, the long-anticipated federal cannabis legalization bill from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senators Cory Booker and Ron Wyden has finally been filed. So a year after they held a press conference to introduce their intention to file it, a year later they have finally filed it. So I do consider this a step in the right direction, and so just wanted to share what Brady Cobb relays, as he is a DC lobbyist and insider and has a lot more information on what could actually be what could this eventually lead to than we do. So we do appreciate the context, as he adds, slightly better than the discussion draft. The real positive, outside of a legalization bill finally being filed in the Senate, is that some of the provisions can and will be used in other legislative efforts alongside SAFE. So AKA the active period is officially active, with the hearing coming next week. And so obviously better that this hearing is happening than not, especially in the Senate as opposed to in the House where we're used to them being done. So thanks, Todd, for sharing. Decriminalizing cannabis at the federal level. The Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Terrorism, chaired by Senator Cory Booker, is expected to meet next week, Tuesday, or this upcoming week, Tuesday, July 26th at 2:30. And apparently we hear a friend of ours will be testifying. I don't know exactly who that is. I didn't look into it, but it's probably Weldon Angelos, who I featured in my last week's video, partnered with Verano for Mission Green, and he is one of those who was pardoned by former President Trump and is sort of pushing this effort for clemency at the federal level and releasing everyone from jail as they should be released, because they should not be there, and obviously Biden should keep his campaign promises. But with that, just wanted to share this article as well, so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but it will be below if you wanted to grab it. But Marijuana Moment reporting that Schumer commits to bipartisan work to pass cannabis reform this year after legalization bill unveiled. And while we do love to see this headline and the sentiment change from Booker, in reality they don't specify which type of reform, and for us in the know, we know that legalization is likely not going to take place unless some sort of a miracle happens and cannabis is descheduled from the Controlled Substances Act just like that. But I have a feeling that the government's going to try and do everything in their power not to allow that to happen, but then try and come up with solutions that work around that. And so just wanted to share that Schumer is repeating that he wants to get something done this year, and so that would mean from now until November, because there's a very small chance that the Dems will actually keep the Senate and the House based on how they've governed from the last year and a half as we move forward from now until November. And so while they are going to introduce CAOA, and while I do expect that bill to be dead on arrival because the taxes are too high and ultimately would crush the industry in the long run, the good news is that it sounds like Schumer intends to keep his campaign promises if he's committing to this. I don't think there'd be better timing for this when the hypocrisy could not be more infuriating and the irony just gets disgusting, because I wanted to share this story. Hunter Biden's wife, Melissa Cohen, is spotted leaving a cannabis shop in Malibu with Secret Service agents, right? Laws for thee, not for me. And so just pisses me off, but had to share this because, again, when the president does not keep his campaign promises, yet we have his degenerate son's wife going to cannabis in California because it's legal there, and obviously she's not facing any repercussions, just pisses you off. And the fact that people are still in jail is infuriating. But then we've also got this one from Joe Greisler, and another armed robbery at an all-cash dispensary. Attempted robbery at Thackerville, Oklahoma dispensary turns deadly for would-be robber. And so thankfully in this situation, it wasn't tragic for the employees working at the dispensary, and it was tragic for the robber that attempted to break laws and, obviously rob these people and put them in a tough spot. But if that is what happens when you do not pass the Safe Banking Act and you allow this problem to exacerbate. But over time, as the problem continues, it just requires a solution to that problem. And so could a potential solution be in the works after so many months of delaying? Only Schumer really knows. But to reiterate again, Marijuana Moment highlights Senate bill to federally legalize cannabis and promote social equity finally filed by Schumer, Booker, and Wyden. So I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but what's different this time around than when they filed the draft before? In any case, the main thrust of the now filed 296-page legalization bill closely resembles that of the earlier version, which weighed in at a mere 163 pages, though the senators highlighted a number of changes. For example, there are revisions concerning cannabis industry workers' rights, a federal responsibility to set an impaired driving standard, which I think will be a lot easier said than done because cannabis is different than alcohol, plus banking access, expungements, and penalties for possessing or distributing large quantities of cannabis without a federal permit. So that seems fair that they've added a lot into this, but for that same reason, I'm not an expert in policy, but I think there's just too much stuffed into the CAOA for it to be able to pass, or for any Republicans to even want to sign on and agree to it. And so I think it will be dead on arrival, but here are the details of the key provisions of CAOA CAOA as introduced. And so you can pause to read one main thing. You'll read this first line and be like, oh, that sounds great. Require the Attorney General to finalize a rule removing cannabis from the CSA within 180 days of enactment. So while we love the sound of that intention, it's immediately offset by the fact that they want to impose a 5% federal excise tax on small to mid-sized cannabis producers, which would gradually increase to 12.5% after 5 years, while for large businesses, the tax would start at 10% and increase to a maximum of 5%. And when I read this, all this tells me is that it's going to make it harder for these companies to grow and sustainably become profitable over time, and then making it easier for big alcohol and big tobacco to swoop in and buy these assets, which I don't think I want to have happen. But again, what I think doesn't necessarily matter here. Main thing on top of this why I don't think Republicans could sign on is because there should be as little federal overhang on cannabis laws or any of this as possible. States' rights are meant to supersede federal rights, and the whole thing that we're fighting for is getting the federal control off of the cannabis plant in general. So more federal control would not be a good thing, and that's also why I think CAOA will be dead on arrival. But I'll stop blabbering and let you pause to read if you want. So you can pause to read this snippet here. Otherwise, you can grab the whole article below. Otherwise, I'll scroll down, and then so you can pause to read from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network down to further. There would be a 10-year pilot program. Pause to read. Okay, and then I'll scroll down further. There would be a 10-year pilot program all the way down to, for example, evaluations of the societal impact. You can pause to read. And then the Government Accountability Office would be required to facilitate all the way down to, which would include money for education enforcement. You can pause to read that. And then so that's the last bit. So just wanted to share everything that was included there if you wanted to go through that. And so on top of that, just wanted to highlight that I'm not the only one that does believe that these taxes are too high. So just wanted to share how MJ Stock Trader also has the same perspective as me. The CAOA is not passable for a lot of reasons, but one is it punishes bigger cannabis companies with twice the tax. Schumer knows this won't be acceptable to the GOP or the industry and put this poison pill in it. So this is just an example of what I was going through there. But just wanted to share that I'm not the only one that believes that. Let me know in the comments what you think about the CAOA. Do you think it can pass? Some miraculous thing can happen that will allow it to pass, or do you think it's dead on arrival? Let me know in the comments. But on top of that, just wanted to share this from other sources as well. So Nat Fertig, writer for Politico, has also shared that it is finally here. The long-awaited Senate cannabis decriminalization bill led by Senator Schumer, Wyden, and Booker is being formally introduced today. Story on Politico.com. And so there's another summary provided by her. And so I will just share this here if you wanted to pause to read. Another summary if you just didn't bother pausing to read the other ones. So this is here if you want. Another one you can pause to read as it goes through public health, then public safety, then regulation and taxation. It's just too much, man. Let it be up to the states. Research, entrepreneurship, and restorative justice. Yeah, just deschedule at the federal level and let the states decide. That's how it should be, at least in my opinion. And then lastly, workers' rights. So you can pause to read here just for all that information in the summary provided by Nat Fertig from Politico. And on top of that, though, this was significant cannabis news, so thanks, Nat, for sharing this one. Congress appears ready to send the first ever cannabis bill to POTUS's desk. The House and Senate have collabed on a weed research bill that lawmakers expect votes on next week. So I think that's this upcoming week. But again, you hear whispers about this, very little of the positive news being reported. And so it's a combo of research bills that have already passed both chambers. So keep in mind, there's no SAFE, nothing included. It's essentially just to streamline research so that they don't have to actually deschedule cannabis and keep their campaign promises, which we would all want. Of course, they don't want it. They're going to have a workaround, and so that they've come up with this solution. And so she does add a little bit of context down here, and I just thought this was kind of funny. Two bills combined were added from these sponsors. Someone goes, does it include SAFE? No, it's a research bill. After she reiterates, it's just a research bill. So yeah, unfortunately, just a research bill. And again, I just see this as a workaround so that they don't have to actually deschedule, but we'll see what happens in the coming months as we head into November. But with that, here's some snippets from investment firms, so I wanted to share them. Todd Harrison from Isaac Boltansky on U.S. Cannabis. This is what BTIG has to say from this latest development. And so I can't even actually read this part, so I'm just going to share this one snippet and then allow you to grab the link below or pause to read. But while the CAOA is another mile marker in the broader cannabis conversation, it is important to state with emphatic clarity that it has no path to passage during this Congress, and its primary utility is a political cover to embrace a more targeted legislative package. From our seat, the CAOA is a messaging bill that should allow Senate Democrats to uniformly pivot to consideration of narrower measures, including cannabis banking legislation. We remain bullish on cannabis banking legislation during the Congress and continue to believe that the annual defense bill is the best legislative vehicle to carry the measure to the president's desk. So they still think SAFE might end up just passing the NDAA at the end of the year. But so again, that is BTIG also agreeing with MJ Stock Trader and myself that CAOA just will not be able to pass. And so more information here if you wanted to read. Cannabis Senate Democrats release comprehensive reform proposal, but focus remains on expected SAFE pivot. What does the CAOA do and what surprised you? CAOA release dovetails with our bullish view on cannabis banking. So you can pause to read this here as it's just going to be a bit too small if I click on it, and then you can pause to read the rest. What should we expect from next week's Senate cannabis hearing, Democrats, Republicans, and then why we remain bullish on cannabis banking becoming law this time. So you can pause to read that. While I will click on it and just allow you to grab that if it's clear enough for you to read. Otherwise, you can grab the link below. And so with that, we move on to this one from Evercore ISI on U.S. cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. Ignore the Schumer cannabis bill. Focus on the possibility, though not a certainty. So again, prepare for your own situation of a lame duck deal. So more information here. Same story, but different perspective on it. So you can pause to read that one from Evercore ISI. We've got this one from AGP, touch of Aaron Gray on U.S. cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. This now allows Senator Schumer, again, to move past CAOA to a more piecemeal reform that has bipartisan support. And so seems like AGP agrees with BTIG, thinks the same. CAOA is out, so we are safe to move to passable cannabis reform. Might just be fun to work for one of these investment firms just to come up with punny titles all day long. So this is what AGP has to say. You can pause to read that one. And while we've got this one from Hedge Cannabis on U.S. cannabis as well. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. And so this is what Hedge has to say, again, on the same news. Where do we go from here? So you can pause to read if you want to get what Hedge has to say on that. Well, we've got this one from Dennis Root of sharing what Seaport Global has to say as they launch coverage of 8 U.S. cannabis companies. Commodity that never smelled so sweet. Cannabis stocks are trading at extremely discounted valuations. So I'm just going to read the highlights from what Steve Gelsey, the analyst at Seaport Global, has to say. With budgets constrained, we believe new customer penetration rates could accelerate as consumers spend more time at home, and the bang per buck for cannabis versus alcohol does keep moving higher. On top of that, if there was ever a time to buy over the last 18 months, we believe it's today. Randhawa said, and while that would take patience of steel, I do not disagree with that statement. And so lastly, during the current time of high inflation and rising interest rates, value names in the sector typically outperform, he said. And so they've initiated coverage on many of the tier 1 MSOs and tier 2s, including Ascend Wellness, Air Wellness, Curaleaf Holdings, Green Thumb Industries, Jushi Holdings, Terra Ascend, Trulieve Cannabis Corp, and Verano Holdings. And you'll notice they don't include Cresco in there or Columbia Care. I don't know why, but that does not shake my confidence in Cresco whatsoever. And so with that, we move along. Thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. V8 on U.S. cannabis. They touch on Schumer bill introduction moves the chains towards incremental reform. So you can pause to read what V8 has to say about the recent cannabis news this week. Well, we've also got Todd Harrison sharing what Pablo at Cantor has to say. And so this is what Cantor and Pablo, who's often been very wrong, has to say. And he's been typically very bearish. Although since he's started to be bearish, all the news has made us become a bit more optimistic and bullish that we're going to get something from now until November. So you can pause to read what Pablo has to say. Then the next one, what is new regarding our cannabis stock angle or investment angle? So lots of snippet points here if you wanted to read through them as well. Pause to read. Well, we've got brief thoughts on what we think matters and would be positive for U.S. cannabis stocks and what is not. You can pause to read. And then lastly, a brief reminder of the terms and their relevance to stocks. Descheduling, rescheduling, decriminalization, and legalization. So a bit of education there from Pablo. And this last one from Jeffries on U.S. cannabis. So thank you, Todd, for sharing this. So that's a lot of perspective from investment analysts, but again, it is speculation, so you can read through that to compare with what you already know and potentially make better investment decisions, but at the same time, just take it as a positive incremental step, and we'll wait to see how next week unfolds, and then we'll move through there. But just to add what Jeffries has to say, this main snippet significantly from an investment perspective, at least, it is possible more incremental reform could also lead to capital market protections, uplisting, and new institutional investment. So that comes from Jeffries, so you can pause to read for more information and insights as to what has happened. The bill is going nowhere right now, yet it could still prove significant for near-term change and a possible incremental pivot, highlighting what they've all been sort of saying, but again, it is still speculation. Keep that in mind. So on to some state news. MJ Biz Daily reports that Illinois issues 185 new rec cannabis retail licenses, which is huge news as on Friday, regulators announced tentative winners for the 185 new recreational retail permits, which means that the cannabis retail market in the state will more than double since there are only 110 adult use shops in operation right now. And so this will lead to 295 shops eventually coming online, hopefully by March of 2023. Sooner than that would be even better. And so with that, still more information here, but the licensees now from this point forward have 180 days to gain that approval from the IDFPR, the agency stated, and during that time must, among other things, choose locations for their stores, send floor plans to the agency for approval, submit principal officer fingerprints to the state for records, and pay licensing fees. So I believe this will be in the hands of the licensee winners and then the regulators. As quickly as they can get all that done and then send that approval and then the regulators can approve them, I believe these new shops can come online. So that is huge news for Illinois and all the MSOs that operate in that state. Well, if we move over to the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for Florida this past week, the week from July 18th to the 22nd, we see that no new dispensary locations were approved after many dispensaries were approved the week before that, while their qualified patient count did increase to 738,908, up from last week, which represents an increase of 1,448 patients. So again, peak summer, we are seeing that number of new patients being recruited slowing down a little bit, but I imagine it will pick up as we head into the fall. And so with that, we can see dispensations for the week of July 15th to the 21st. All the MSOs that operate in the state, dispensing locations that they have in operation right now. And we can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, number of milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower. So it looks like strong sales across the board. So while Trulieve still enjoys that #1 market share spot by a mile, it does look like Verano and Curaleaf are slowly eating away as they continue to open up new dispensary locations. And with that, wanted to share this one from Christopher Norman, as the New Jersey CRC is set to meet on Thursday this week, July 28th. And it seems like in this meeting, they will go over a review and decision-making on certain applications for a change in location concerning alternative treatment centers and adult-use cannabis businesses. And so with that, I don't know exactly what's going to be in the meeting, but after the meeting, I will relay the news on next week's video, as it will include likely a bit of adult use cannabis applications. And so I don't know if this might mean that they're going to approve a conditional 81 licenses to potentially social equity applicants. That would be awesome. But I do believe that this means that alternative treatment center application to expand into adult use and possible 2 considerations. And so with that, Chris does add a bit of context. Likely 3rd adult use dispensary license approval to Verano and Neptune, and possibly Curaleaf in Bordentown. So big tranche of conditional adult licenses coming. And so that could be for social equity applicants. I'd hope so, because I'm sure that they would love to be able to get their businesses running while the MSOs are. And so possibly 1 or more MSOs looking to relocate from unfriendly host. My speculation, Ascend Wellness Holdings in Montclair, maybe GTI and Paramus. And so again, that's coming from Christopher, who is a great source on the ground. And on top of that, I do believe we will get the information. I believe in May, we got the April sales from New Jersey, but I believe we will get the May, the June, and July sales possibly in this meeting, or we might have to wait until August for them to release that info. But if that information is released, I will certainly have that in my next week's video for you, because we do want to see how New Jersey has been doing since they launched adult use. And after reporting that 1 monthly figure, they decided that they're going to do it quarterly. So that's why we've had to wait to see it, which kind of sucks. But with that, just wanted to share that Christopher Norman does highlight, well, Logic Prevails is highlighting that, unfortunately, share prices for these MSOs have continued to go down. And unfortunately, the total financing transactions in the cannabis industry, Q2 of 2022, are at an all-time low. The reality is what Christopher Norman does highlight, that has been true in the past. But there's an awful lot of new assets turning on in the next 12 months, which was just New Jersey. That just turned on in April. They could have turned on in January 2021, much like Arizona. New York could have too, but they didn't. So we have to adapt. And since time has passed and we are here now, New Jersey has launched. We'll have Illinois getting an extra 185 dispensaries, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and then New York coming online. So while that has been the case for the last 18 months, the reality is that a lot of new assets are going to be coming on, and that will drive a lot of fundamental sales growth to the bottom line for these companies. And so with that, wanted to share is that will likely also help the cannabis market apparently get to $197.5 billion by 2028. And so this is another one of those reports, but wanted to share it from High Times, as these new assets coming online will certainly help. And so this is just another report entitled Global Cannabis Market, and this one coming from consulting firm SkyQuest Technology. So again, take these with a grain of salt, not at face value, but just wanted to share as they are projecting that the global cannabis market is currently valued at $28.6 billion as of 2021, and projects that the industry will grow up to $197.75 billion by 2028. And that would be the best case scenario if Germany does legalize, then, and the US does deschedule cannabis, then allowing, the global market to start to slowly but surely expand, and we can start to study and find out the full potential of this medicine. So there's a lot more information here if you wanted to pause to read, but just wanted to share that as this was funny, and this would be a side effect of a lot of these new assets coming online as well. Plus also other global markets starting to come online as well. And so with that, I wanted to share new cannabis ventures, this story on Trulieve, how Trulieve plans to generate more than $1.3 billion of revenue in 2022. And so just wanted to share this if you are a Trulieve shareholder or if you're interested in Trulieve and you wanted to learn more. So this is an interview with Alan Brockstein, who runs this site, New Cannabis Ventures, and Kim Rivers, CEO of Trulieve. And so more information down here if you wanted to grab the link below, and you can check that out. While we move on to this one from Nats Fertig, so some other developments. Apparently, as law enforcement experts tell BorderReport.com that Mexican drug cartels are moving away from dealing pot due to legalization efforts in the US. Yeah, right. It's just because cannabis is way less profitable than a cheap powder that you can outsource from China. And so the real reason is that higher profit margins in the manufacturing of synthetic drugs, such as fentanyl and methamphetamines, is a lot more appealing to these organized crime groups than cannabis anymore. And so with that, I don't think there's a clear call to action as to why we ought to end the failed war on drugs once and forever and end prohibition, because clearly the criminalization of drugs has not worked, and it's only allowed these organized crime cartels to thrive and grow over time, because they wouldn't exist if we created legal adult use markets for them a long time ago so that adults could legally access safe products as opposed to products that they get from the illicit market that could be contaminated with fentanyl or other methamphetamines. It's as simple as that. Well, the solution is simple. It's just not easy to implement, because I imagine a lot of private interests make a lot of money from the status quo, and that's why many of them lobby to keep the status quo the way it is. And so that's why incremental reform is better, because you're never going to get everything all at once. And so with that, I wanted to share this one from Todd, as again, does highlight the reality that Moscow says U.S. must respect Russian law in Griner case, especially when the U.S. has the same bullshit laws. So just wanted to touch base on this again. It sucks that Brittany Griner is detained and that she might face 10 years in prison, but you cannot claim the moral high ground in the U.S. when the U.S. has the same federal laws that Moscow essentially has. And so with that, wanted to share though from New Cannabis Ventures as Canadian cannabis sales increased 0.7% sequentially to record 375.8 Canadian million in May. And so Stats Canada released May retail sales for the country, with cannabis sales increasing from April by 0.7% to 375.8 million, while April was revised from 372.4 million to 373.4 million as well. The sales were up 20.1% from a year ago, which does continue to show nice year-over-year growth, down from the 26.1% April growth rate and near the lowest annual growth rate of 19.2% in December. And again, that is helped thankfully by Ontario, our most populated province, opening 120 stores a month. And so if we just go to the breakdown here, we can see again Ontario leading the way, selling a little bit more than they did in April. But the main thing is Quebec, our second most populated province with 8 million people, still wants to just keep 56 stores. Hence why their sales have stayed relatively flat as a board over time, while Alberta and British Columbia, two other provinces, I know Alberta has like half the population of Quebec, yet they're doing a lot more in sales, 65.3 million, because from the get-go they went with the private retail model and allowed any of their citizens to open a dispensary from the get-go, not restricting it to a provincial model like Quebec. While British Columbia, I know they have more people than Alberta, but they've also just recently surpassed Quebec, reaching 54.9 million in sales. So good to see Canada slowly but surely continuing to grow despite our limited market size. So with that, just wanted to share that TLRY, as I forgot to report this I think last week, but TLRY Brands is expected to announce their fourth quarter and fiscal year 2022 financial results on July 28th, as highlighting their full fiscal year, which ends May 31st, 2022, plus Q4 sales, which will account for sales in March, April, and May. And so they'll be releasing these before the financial markets open on July 28th. And so I am looking forward to this as a TLRY shareholder, as I do want to see whether or not they've been able to increase their market share, as Canada has slowly but surely been able to grow that over the last few months. While lastly, we get to this newest episode of the Cannabis Investing Network, number 147, Q4 and Q1 financial review of the Big 5 MSOs, featuring Nick Gastovich, aka Canna Investments. And so big thanks to these guys for putting this content out as well. And while I did not listen to the whole thing yesterday, I cannot recommend this enough to cannabis investors out there. I got through the first half and I plan to listen to the second half today, but I think I got through Cresco, Curaleaf, and then Trulieve. But nonetheless, as I own Trulieve and Cresco as well as Verano, my biggest holding is Cresco, and I'm holding extremely heavy bags. But regardless, whether or not they think that the deal with Columbia Care is very complicated, I still think that it can go through, and when it does go through, I'm going to be very happy with Cresco's wholesale approach, plus the fact that they just got that footprint from Columbia Care. And so regardless of the heavy bags I'm holding, it does make me more and more confident in Cresco, in Trulieve, in Verano, and in this industry as a whole, as they deep dive and highlight all the nitty-gritty that we forget about, especially as the sentiment is starting to change and the momentum is building from now until November for some sort of incremental reform. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.